Hello and welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with Jon Uhler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. On today's show, a reluctant investigator discusses how this movement has affected her family and her friends. Let's jump right into Jon Uhler right now, who's ready to go and standing by with, details on how this is actually affecting more than just one reluctant investigator. It's really affecting the world.
Brad, I couldn't be more pleased. I know I often say that, but it is very true. Today we have a mother who has found herself in the midst of what so many parents have found themselves in the midst of, which is having to really address the trans movement. Oftentimes I call it the trans deception. And Denise and I connected, and her story is a compelling one in the sense that she's a mother that she has found she's had to step up, because the more she found out what's been going on in the school system with social emotional learning, there's euphemistic terms for all of this, what used to also be called CRT a little bit. We're all familiar with these changes that are going on in curriculum and the overall atmosphere of schools, and how it's making it easier for very, very deviant things to be brought into the schools. Denise started to see more and more of that, and she found herself investigating, and what she uncovered as she dug further and further raised alarm bells, which also coincided with changes she started to see in some of her own kids as far as the influence. Denise, thank you for being willing to come onto the program. We are going to use this as an introduction for you, and then we're going to have you back because you are a wealth of knowledge. What you have uncovered that's going on in schools today, it involves school social workers, it involves various individuals at different levels, including school boards. Parents need to understand, and you've done some deep digging, so welcome to Unmasks the Trans Movement.
Thanks, good to see you.
So talk to us, how did you start finding those things that concerned you, and then share with the viewers, what you started to see, ironically, about the same time in one of your daughters?
Well, we moved to a new city back in 2017, and I noticed very, very early on, within the first semester, I got a phone call from my daughter, who was in 7th grade at the time. She had a phone because she played a sport with some girls who were older than her. And so they communicated via some type of app. So she needed a cell phone to communicate with her coach. And I'm sitting at home. This is, ironically, again, looking back, these dates all make sense because this was about Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. This was the student walkout over gun violence. And I'm sitting at home working, and I get a text that says, "Mom, they're saying we have to leave the school." And I said, "Well, honey, why do you have to leave the school?" She's 12. It's her first semester here. "Well, it's some kind of protest, and the teachers are saying that we have to walk out of the school." And I'm thinking, where are you going to go? Who's telling you to do this? And she said, "The teachers." And I'm thinking, okay, why would teachers tell you to walk out of the school? I drop you off at that door. That's a locked school. You should be there when I pick you up. And what really struck me is she said, if I don't go, I'm afraid that the teachers will think I'm not against gun violence. So this is a 12-year-old already having to make this decision. And I said, your butt stays in that chair. I don't care what happens. You have a teacher call me. We're not doing this. So that was the first episode. And then there was encouragement to leave the school and protest over sexual harassment. And then it was the teachers negotiating with the NEA. And then it was the gender identity policy. At the time, I had no idea this was going on. This was back in 2017. I believe Westboro Baptist Church even showed up for that event. Our school board was changing their harassment and discrimination policy to include gender identity. And this was 2017. So I don't think many people in the community really even knew what that meant. We realized we had moved to a school district that had a staff and a school board that was pushing social activism and student voice. And it was just this relentless push. Do something, say something, get out there, get involved. And I think, yes, maybe that can be one element of a child's life, a social consciousness and being aware of injustice in the world. But these are kids. She was 12 at the time. There's another So I realized this was going on and didn't really think much of it. I just thought, okay, certain teachers, typically it's the ELA teachers. There was a social studies teacher that was doing this push, started hosting debates. A lot of kids got into a lot of trouble in 2019 with Black Lives Matter because of some of the debates that they had. I saw death threats on Twitter against 15-year-old boys in this community because of these debates. So I'm thinking these teachers are a little bit, my thought was, as an adult, if I encourage a child to walk out of school in protest and that child gets hit in a crosswalk, now what? You know, that's irresponsible, that's dangerous, and bypassing any kind of parental notification. They can't go on a field trip without me signing permission. So why do I have teachers trying to push my 12-year-old to go out and protest in the street? So that was when we first said something's amiss here. And then COVID happened, right as she was starting high school. So the story was we're going to shut down at spring break. And then when it was time to come back, we're going to do school on Zoom. And that was not going well at our home. And we started thinking policy is the problem here. And my husband contemplated a run for school board, which he ultimately took on. And we were very, very, very naive when that started. We had no idea what we were up against, how deep it was. If you had tried to explain the worldview of some of these individuals to me, I would not have believed you. I would have said, that's insane. There's no way that A, they believe this, or B, that they're teaching this to children. We just were clueless to what was going on.
So Denise, just so that the viewers, and you're doing a great job explaining this, I really want to emphasize. So you're a parent, you're trusting that those
Absolutely.
that are entrusted with the education of your kids, as well as the school board, you're assuming that they are there to educate. Used to be reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Well, that's why we moved here.
Okay, so you're finding, so pick up again where before I interrupted, but I really want people to understand that at their school board, we assume that people are running for school board for the right reason, which is to further education, and that people become teachers or involved in the education system because they're there to educate. But you were finding, and you found that there's something different going on.
Mm-hmm. Well, the rationale was we were seeing the actual learning loss happen. And I think we're looking back now and we're recognizing the learning loss, and we're recognizing what they now love to call a mental health crisis in kids this age. And I felt like this was something they were creating. They were creating a mental health crisis. They were creating the learning loss problem. At the time, everyone was terrified of COVID. And so I have a lot of grace to give to the decision makers in that process. But that's beside the point of what we're talking about today. This is just how I started digging in and trying to figure out what was going on. So through that process, the first thing that happened when my husband announced that he was running, and he's never been a political figure. I don't think anyone who knows him could even guess where he stands politically. I had some trouble with a third grade reading assessment almost 15 years ago now that I thought was problematic developmentally. And I spoke out about that and fought against that and spoke with legislators about that where we used to live and was effective that way. But I had hung that hat up. I did not want to get involved in this, but we were watching this happen to our kids and everyone else's kids, and no one else was stepping up, and no one else had the qualifications that he brought to the table. The first thing that happened was he started getting attacked online by social workers. And I thought, what have you said about social workers? What is going on here? The social workers came for him. Some of the teachers, most predominantly ELA teachers, were coming at him. And it didn't make sense to us because he hadn't even really made any kind of statement about what he wanted to do yet. It was just, no, not you, only this, only what we have going on here. Nothing is going to get in the way of what we're doing in this school. So I get to looking, and we have this strategic plan that when we first moved here, they broke out and said, we're going to do this strategic plan. We're going to have stakeholders. We're going to have committees. The community, business leaders, students, everyone's going to have a voice in this strategic plan. So I thought, okay, maybe this is about the strategic plan. So I started looking into that, and I see that they've changed their discrimination policy to include gender identity, which means, and I don't know that many people understand what that means. If you misgender someone, or if you don't use their proper chosen pronoun, that now qualifies as harassment. And these are kids. So,
Denise,
yes, sir.
Repeat that, because this is now where our concern, unmasking the trans movement. So you see some concerns, there's some pushback. Your husband, as a concerned father, is going to run for school board. And before you know it, you're seeing this term gender, something pertaining to gender ideology.
Yes.
Has to do with pronouns.
Yes.
Repeat that so parents can understand.
So, and we found this out the hard way, and I know other parents who have found this the hard way. If you have a child, and I'm going to use an example that I think might not resonate in your district, but it does here. If you have a child, let's say in 7th grade, who identifies as a cat, this child has lived in this district for many years, has friends that have been friends with this child from the time they were in pre-K together. If there are two things that parents need to know. If your child refers to that child as anything other than a cat, then that is considered harassment and goes into their discipline folder. That was the first thing. I'm trying to remember the other part of that. Anyway.
You had referenced about misgendering or pronouns. So here, you think you're sending your kid to be educated in reading, writing, and arithmetic, and before you know it, stuff's going on at school to where you now have this ideology coming in, being represented by different terms. And
well, I remember what I was going to say about that. The other thing that happens is it doesn't have to be that child that reports it. If another child sees this happen, they can report it. So that's best I can tell. I have not seen that in writing, but I've seen the way that it plays out. If another child sees it and reports it, it's the same as if the child that it happened to reported it, and the discipline is the same, and it goes into your folder. And since we have a longitudinal database system, anything that goes into your disciplinary folder will follow you.
What's the discipline
and now
on
we
that?
have
What's
say
the
again?
discipline? What's the discipline on that?
Depends on the level of offense. I know of one family whose son was suspended for 3 days. And when she looked into the discipline matrix, she said, why is my son getting the maximum penalty for this? And they said, well, it's because of his history of racial incidents. And she says, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, there was something that happened when he was in 4th grade with a girl on the swing too long. And he said to her something like, I don't understand, you're mumbling. And that went into his file as a race-based harassment incident.
Wow.
And these kids carry these folders with them. So because we have a longitudinal database system, if he leaves this school, he now carries with him a history of race-based harassment. And I don't think parents, for me, what that does is it creates an environment where all the kids are conforming because they're terrified of what happens if they don't. And I've had kids say to me when they're talking about the behaviors that certain kids are allowed to do, they say, if we did that, it wouldn't be allowed. But no one's going to say anything because you'll be accused of some sort of phobia or bigotry. You must use their pronouns. You must refer to them as a cat. You must tolerate whatever they're doing at the lunch table because saying something is going to get you in trouble. And the kids are very aware of that. So it creates in this very insidious way, this culture of conformity because everyone is afraid to go after the sacred cow for any reason. They're not held accountable because, I'm sorry, are you bigoted? Do you have some sort of phobia? Do you need retraining? Really, you're not allowed to have an opinion about anything if it does not conform to the party line, or this will go down in your permanent record.
There you go. And what a big part of what you're referencing, Denise, is this gender ideology.
Yes.
Now has made its way into school. So we think parents are assuming kid gets on the bus, is going to go learn about reading, writing, and arithmetic. What they're not aware of is the culture now within that school is being used to mold their child on an emotional level.
Yes.
Which not only inhibits the ability to learn, but it's creating a dynamic, it's creating a peer culture that along with supposed academics, this child's perspective of life, perspective of themselves, it's now gender ideology has been introduced so that it rises to the level of importance of the actual content of the reading, writing, and arithmetic. These kids are being, in essence, indoctrinated.
Yes. Yes. I saw an example today we have a reading aid, and she was talking about her queerness and how she provides representation for the elementary students and how wonderful it would have been if she had had that sort of representation as a child. This is part of hiring for inclusivity. But what I noticed is she's not here to help with reading. She's here to offer salvation to these children. She's looking for the child that was her to reach her hand out and pull that child out of whatever she has been through. And she is an activist. And her goal is not that your child read, but that your child become comfortable with the queerness that every child is born with.
And let me at this point, Denise, it's very important because I'm anticipating, the detractors, as it were, or those that are critical of what we're saying. And what we're saying is leave kids alone. Let them learn.
Absolutely.
Do not influence them. This is unduly influencing them in what direction, of course. And
I wouldn't say anything about that. I wouldn't even have an awareness of this woman if she weren't posting it on social media. And she says, this is my role here. And what an important role it is that she model queerness to these kids. She did that. I have no problem with her on any kind of personal level. I'm not mad at anybody, but I want parents to know that they're sending their kids into an environment where there are great teachers, there are great counselors, but there are also a segment of people who are operating as activists within the system. And I think that role supersedes, your reading, your math, your arithmetic, your spelling. It's more about indoctrinating kids into a queer consciousness.
These individuals are on a personal mission.
It's a worldview. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the average parent has
Denise started, and that's what, first of all, I want everyone to understand that we are not anti anything per se.
No,
I mean, there's certain things we have concerns
children.
About. That's it. We're not anti anything. We are protective of women and children. We're protective of vulnerable kids. So what people, those that are agenda driven will say, if they're listening to us right now, oh, Jon and Brad and Denise, they're phobic. They're targeting this vulnerable population, and we're doing nothing of the same. As a matter of fact, we're not phobic against anything.
Far from it. Keep this crap away from our kids. Bottom line is that's what I as a parent have to say. That's what Denise has to say as a parent, and I continue to hold these sessions all because of that issue. You need to stand up to this. We need to defeat this, and this indoctrination needs to stop in our schools immediately.
It's crossing a boundary with children.
Denise, let me throw this in because this is so crucial to what you're now going to also reference in one way, because there's so much, and we will continue multiple parts. Denise, we're going to have you back. But my concern also with the background of working with sexual predators and white-collar psychopaths and those that would exploit and take advantage of, that this opens the door for, this dumbs down the school district, their ability to meaningfully discern who has the best interest of a child in mind, because those that will exploit children, those that will cross their boundaries, we're hearing more and more of teachers that are arrested for sexual abuse, for sexual exploitation. When someone, an adult, gets into a school system and they're motivated to reference or motivated out of quote unquote queer theory, you have no queer theory without being highly sexually deviant.
And there are no boundaries.
There you go. That's our concern.
Yes.
That it's opening up the door and it's dumbing down intuition and it's allowing for boundaries to be crossed and unduly influenced.
And I'll tell you, this was not my starting point. This isn't where I started. This is after 2 years of watching what this was doing to my daughter. That's when I said, it's not comfortable for me to say these things. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. But we're talking about children, and I'm seeing things that, like you said, they're dumbing down intuition. It used to be that we would tell children, if something makes you uncomfortable, come and tell mom. We need to know. Now we're telling them nothing should make you uncomfortable. If something makes you feel uncomfortable, you need to check that voice, because we're welcoming and inclusive, and we want everyone to feel like they belong. And so you're telling a child, if you want to be a good person, you have to ignore the things that are going on in your spirit and your conscience and your body, those God-given alarms that say something's not right here. And when you tell a child to ignore that, you're putting them in danger, and their parents have no idea this is happening. And I'm specifically speaking about little girls. I think when you have little girls, who are typically more agreeable, they're not going to say no. Relationship is important. And this is their value system. They're always doing check-ins with how's our relationship? Are we, do we like each other today? That's where they get their reassurance. And you're taking them at that very vulnerable time and introducing all of these ideas that destabilize them. And I think it's one thing for us to speak about that as adults. I come with a very well thought out and agonized over worldview. You come to your faith, you come to your understanding of what is real and what is justice and what matters in the world. Everybody kind of comes to that on their own through their lives, and it's changing. But as adults, we do that on a foundation of what we believe to be true. But when you have children and they don't have that foundation yet, right? The only thing they have is what their parents have told them. And not only do you come in and say, okay, this thing that doesn't make sense to you, we're telling you it's true, even though you're uncomfortable with it. And we're also telling you that it doesn't match up with what your parents have taught you. Now we've kicked the stool out from under you. It's so confusing to children, and it's driving a wedge in between children and parents. My daughter got into the car one day with no prompting in 4th grade. Her father and I had never said this word before, and she said, "Mom, why do you and Dad hate trans people?" I said, "What are you talking about?" Well, she was told that trans people are marginalized, and it's often done by dominant groups, that being white, Christian, heterosexual. Well, who did they just describe? Her mom and dad. Her mom and dad are marginalizing trans people. So now we're suspect in the eyes of our child. And these are just seeds that get planted one by one by one. And as a parent, you're looking at what's happening to your child, and you have no way to understand it. It's handicapping parents because you can't imagine that this is what's being taught to your child at school.
Disrupting
and the expectations that come with it, and the stress of those expectations. Will I say the right thing? Will I use the wrong name? For an agreeable little girl, that's more stress than she can handle, and she's just trying to learn to read. Come on. We can argue this out on the news, in the courts, in the legislatures, but children should not have to deal with this when they're trying to grow up with COVID going on in the background, with teachers fighting parents and social workers. They don't need this on their plate. It's hard enough.
You're right. And listen, I want to stop you there because I can see that your emotion, your energy is rising. I can tell that you're one of those frustrated parents that are going to be watching this show as well. And it just goes to show you that it's affecting everybody, whether you're knowledgeable about it, whether you've got no knowledge about it. This isn't just about the trans movement. This is about deconstructing core family values within the home. Now,
even more than values, the nature of truth.
One of the things that I want to bring attention to all of our viewers is that at home, that's a place where these discussions need to start and end. They can take the knowledge that they bring home from school, and they can try to convince us as parents that, you know, they've been taught the right way and that this is right and it's not wrong, and how dare you, using Greta's famous words, speak like that. Well, guess what? We have our own family core values, and I will not discern from them. I will not negotiate them, and I will not allow you to not understand what they are first and foremost. So before you as a child get to go on and thinking that you're going to be following the teachers, the drama teacher, the English teacher's program, you're going to have to prove to me that you understand what core family values are within our own house first. And once you get to that, that's where I think you're going to find a positive change within your own dynamic of your own household. And I've lived it. I've done it. And my kids, my daughters come home twice saying, "How come you don't support trans people?" And I said, it's not that I don't support trans people. It's that they are confusing kids and they are deconstructing the family. And I am not going to allow that to happen to our family or anybody else's family going forward. This is why this program is here. This is to educate the individuals, empower parents to take back control of their families, to make sure that they have the tough conversations. I don't like to use these kind of words, but moms and dads out there, you need to grab those and hold on to them because they're not there for long. They're your kids. They're not the schools, and they sure as hell aren't the governments.
Brad, I want to thank you. Those are perfect words, and I want to thank Denise. Denise, we're going to have you back if you're okay. We've just
I love that.
you've just given us context, what caused you to awaken to this. You have become just the consummate investigator, and you have really uncovered very, very concerning things, and you've become more and more aware of the ways this ideology and the overreach is happening. You have invaluable information that parents need to know. If a parent has been stirred, I think you've stirred a lot of parents. If they would like to get a hold of you, or now what we're going to have them do is reach out to us. We will then pass the requests or comments along to you, so we don't get you inundated. They can reach us at they can reach us at unmaskingthetransmovement.com, and we will forward those to you. We're going to have you back. We've just begun to really help set the stage for the additional things you've uncovered. It's going on all over the place in both countries, quite frankly, around the world, in Western world. So this is something that parents cannot turn a blind eye to. Denise, you've been great in helping people understand how this thing is building, and you cannot turn a blind eye to it. So thank you for being on the program. I'm looking forward to having you back very soon, and we will continue to allow you to help educate parents on the steps they can take and what you've uncovered. So thank you again for being with us.
Happy to do it.
Unmasking the Trans Movement with Jon Uhler. That's what this is all about. I'm Brad Wilder. Thanks for watching. We'll look forward to seeing you next time.